got to the end of day 31 of the Undercover Policing Inquiry, Tranche 2, Phase 2. We have been listening to the live evidence of Andy Coles and also 2 appearances from Jessica, both from the start of the day and also just now at the end of the day. Coles has been an absolute piece of work. He has lied horrifically. He still denies having any sort of sexual relationship with Jessica, but he has introduced a whole bunch of new evidence which he did not put in any of his witness statements, nor revealed to any of the previous questioning he had from Operation Hearn about his relationship with Jessica. I'm joined with Bethany Rielly. Once a regular attendee at the Undercover Policing Inquiry, who has made a rare return. What did you make of what Coles had to say today?
Yeah, well, it was basically a huge somersault, process of getting around what is most likely the truth. And honestly, it was quite painful to watch the kind of lengths he was willing to go to say that this didn't happen, from, saying he shared a single bed with her because he had back problems and all the other beds in the house were really uncomfortable. I don't know.
So much happened in that bed. So much happened in that bed. I mean, it was... I think the quote of the day is Barr putting it to him that as a 32-year-old police officer sharing a bed with a 19-year-old woman who had propositioned him for sex that he had tried to get out of by saying that he had a child he was estranged from, there were no vegan condoms available, but that don't worry, he'd have a relationship with her when he got back from France, might be something he would remember. That's really summed up the nonsense. It seemed like every time there was anything difficult in conversation with Jessica, it all happened that night in that single bed they shared together. It was laughable.
Yeah. And it never happened at any other point. And he kind of was pressured to be in a fake relationship, I suppose, was his kind of take on it, just to maintain his legend and his identity. But yeah, it wasn't nice to watch. It is basically him implying that Jessica is, delusional. I think what came out this afternoon is that he told officers investigating kind of, alleged police spy abuse in Operation Hearn and Pitchfords that Jessica was someone who was completely obsessed with him, and he just had to kind of shake her off by giving her little bits and pieces of this and that. And so... yeah, then he kind of tried to back out of saying that he'd said any of those things, suggesting officers had misunderstood him, because we're looking at the notes that these officers wrote up at the time that are being put in front of us, the inquiry. So it's what he allegedly told them. So he can just kind of backtrack on it now, and I think it's been interesting seeing how Barr's handled this, because he,
very different to Lambert, right?
Very different, and he kind of said something which is very true, that unless you ask him something very direct, very specific, he's not going to give you an answer to it.
He was. It was a very irritating witness. He answered a lot of direct questions with some really long-winded anecdotes, and there were some very direct ones about, did you have a sexual relationship with Jessica? And he went, well, the thing was, there was a BBC investigative journalism unit that was going round, and I'd been warned about them by HN86, who told me to be careful when I returned back to my cover accommodation, because I might get followed by an investigative journalist. This was in response to a direct question on having a sexual relationship with Jessica. It really, I think he showed himself not to be a credible witness in any sense of the word. From where I can see Mitting's face. certainly you don't want to read too much into these things, but I don't get the impression that Mitting was that impressed by the evidence he was hearing either.
No, there was a lot of kind of faces, Yeah, that felt like a spiel. I felt like he practiced that in front of the mirror, before today. It was an interesting one, and I guess there's going to be more of this tomorrow and Friday as well.
It'd be interesting to see if it does go the full limit, because I think there's almost a suggestion that perhaps he's shown himself not to be a credible witness in any way, and what's the point in listening to too much more from him? He's introduced a lot of new evidence, things which, I mean, there is reference to them. It's to the points in his witness statements from previous, but he says because he wasn't asked directly on these specific things that he didn't answer them. I mean, it's pointed out to him that there was over 100 questions specifically on a sexual relationship with Jessica, yet he had mentioned nothing of this idea of that he'd promised her to have a relationship with her when she got back. Nothing about this. I mean, he says in his written statement that he categorically never spent the night in bed with her. In a previous, when he was talking to Operation Herman, he said he'd spent 5 or 6 nights in bed with her. But then he said, oh no, he was getting that confused with Andrea McGann. It's been pointed out that Andrea McGann and Jessica are very, very different people physically. That they are not people you would confuse with each other. He also suggested that he'd had sexual advances from a number of others, like that there was a woman in the peace movement, there was a woman at Glastonbury, that he'd been kissed passionately on the lips by a gay man who wanted a sexual relationship. I mean, all 3 of these, I really felt they were being made up on the spot. This idea that somehow he was some irresistible, like, kind of sexual object who was, having to knock back kind of... It just flies into the face of every other single piece of evidence that we've heard. We got shown the witness statement of DWH, who was Brixton Huntsab, who... according to Andy Coles, was de facto leader of Brixton Huntsabs, who can explain, explains that, it was very well known that him and Jessica were in a relationship. He talked about public displays of affection between the two, about them kissing each other goodbye because they were in different SAB groups when they would leave a SAB. Everything suggests, and also
he was a lech. Yeah. He was a lech as well. Yeah. It's his way of kind of trying to get rid of that reputation. Like, no, I was just this poor defenseless undercover police officer, and everyone's throwing themselves at me. When a lot of people have said, and this is in a lot of people's evidence, that he was creepy and lecherous.
Yeah, there's a lot of things which he denies too much. So, for example, when Jessica comes back from France, which is supposedly the time where he's promised her to be in a relationship with her, she comes back from France, doesn't get in contact with him. Supposedly, apparently they bump into each other, but she's moved on. It's pointed out that she moves on much later with QK or KQ. I forget the exact cipher we're using, but who is somebody who she meets through Coles. He sort of denies that. He denies that he ever goes to the house in South London, which is a shared house, which he lives with a bunch of other animal rights activists who are also his targets. He says he might have popped in at some point because...
Once a month.
Yeah, very rarely, because there may have been some ALF activists there in a new cell that he was targeting, but he'd moved on now and was not targeting criminality anymore, but rather the ALF supporters group, which again flies in the face of everything he's been saying about the point of his deployment. It's put to him by Barr that he's all over the place, that his evidence is all over the place, and the reason for that is it's all made up.
Yeah, that was a great, and going back to sort of the bed sharing, that's been a big topic. There's a lot of beds that he jumped around in and from, it was kind of before actions, he would be in squats, share beds with other activists, and there was a lot of kind of excruciating detail about in what manner he shared beds with people, and him just trying to kind of wriggle out of any suggestion that it would be sexual at all, when I don't know. He
really does this thing of conflating the sense, which I think a lot of Huntsabs will recognise, of, crashing on someone's spare mattress for a couple of hours before going on a SAB, when you're fully clothed, got your boots on probably, not under any covers, just sort of lying there. We need to leave at 3:30. It's 2 a.m. now. Let's have a lie down, mate. That scenario with staying overnight in bed, in a state of undress with a much younger woman after having had a few drinks, had a few laughs, late at night. Even some of the words that he used was just so telling about the reality of that situation that it really, it doesn't... it's insulting to suggest that it was anything other than what it really was. But I think he's given too much information. There were the other bits where he talked about, doing shoplifting or his drug taking, where he starts answering the question, then realises what he's saying, and then starts backtracking within the same paragraph, which was laughable, really.
He was like, I shoplifted. But then he said, but no, that was actually just skipping. Yeah. Shoplifting and skipping are completely different things. Yeah.
It's laughable. And I mean, he started off by talking about shoplifting from multinational corporations, and that within the same paragraph, oh no, I was taking vegetables from Covent Garden, from a bin in Covent Garden. I mean, it's just not. I mean, the written debrief, which he gave 6 months after he was removed from the field, was very clear that not only was he taking part in low-level criminality like drug taking, like shoplifting, but also his managers knew, and it was no big deal. Small beer was how Barr put it. I kind of feel there was a lot of his answers that were given today where he gave huge amounts of detail, often quite off topic, that Barr didn't really pick him up on, that he'd be picked up on those tomorrow morning. Because in terms of the timeline of his deployment, it's not, we've got too far through for 3 days of questioning, so I think he's going to be re-examined on some of the detail that he was pushed on today.
I think also, there's going to be a lot more grilling on the tradecraft manual, because that was quite absent from today, yeah. I think, so, that will be interesting to see, how much he shaped the way that future spy cops acted in the field. Because there's a lot of interest in him because of his relationship with Jessica, her age at the time, but, there's more to it than that, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I thought it was really interesting. So one of the things that he casted doubt on was these letters that Jessica sent her best friend when she was in France. Obviously, she didn't have copies of her own letters, but the one she sent to a friend had kept. So she got a hold of them again. And he said, look, this is different handwriting. I think that they're from different people. That these are not credible, these are forgeries. So Jessica was recalled to give evidence at the end of the day, which I wasn't expecting. It was only just literally on this one topic right at the end of the day. She pointed out that she's ambidextrous, that she gone through phases of writing different ways, and we had a whole thing through that. But it just showed the willingness, both this morning and the end of the day, because Jessica gave evidence this morning as well, how much she's willing to go through a process which she herself has described, particularly this morning. She really said that it's re-traumatizing, that the way in which the inquiry is approached, getting people to give evidence, isn't fit for purpose, that she worries about future women giving evidence on this topic, yet she's willing herself to put herself through it again and again, despite herself calling it humiliating, because she's really keen for the truth to come out. I think I pay tribute really to her for having the bravery to do that.
Yeah, absolutely, to go through a whole day of evidence and then to have been called back twice today. Yeah, like you say, she's found this a quite re-traumatizing experience. And yeah, I mean, to have accused someone of what she's accused them of, and for them to completely deny it again on oath, go all these like somersault crazy ways of trying to get around saying what might have happened, it's got to be quite torturous, I would say. So yeah, definitely hats off to Jessica.
We've got 2 more days of Coles. Are you going to be joining us for that?
I'll be here in the morning tomorrow, yes.
Fair play. It should be interesting. I'll be doing a Twitter Spaces tonight, just recapping the day. I'll be doing more of these videos for the next 2 days. Please join us if you can. Anything else you want to add before we sign off?
Just to look out on... I'll address you. Look out for New Internationalist new podcast, The World Unspun. We're going to be doing an episode on the Spycops early next year. Stay tuned.
Thanks for joining us. See you all tomorrow.